So a lot of people right now are shocked because Glenn Greenwald called Tucker Carlson, Steve Bannon, and 2016 candidate Trump, not President Trump, but candidate Trump, he called them socialists. So this comment was shocking to a lot of people because it's pretty dumb. But honestly, before I get into any of that stuff, I think it's good to note that Glenn Greenwald's own politics are actually very murky. They're not as clear as you would think. So he does kind of have some right wing streaks to him. He is in favor of the Citizens United ruling. He does believe that money is speech. So he's not necessarily like this strong leftist that you think he is. For all we know, he really could be somebody who has a right wing ideology, but is kind of masked under the other issues. You know, for Glenn Greenwald, I think most of his taxonomy at this point is essentially just hating on liberals. So I really don't really believe that he's as much of a lefty as people seem to think. He totally could be a cloaked righty, 100%. But all he does now is just shit on liberals, which shitting on liberals is fine, but the way that he does it can often be kind of annoying. But the idea that Tucker Carlson or 2016 era Trump, are socialists is laughable. First of all, the real definition of socialism is workers owning the means of production. What does that mean? Means of production are basically the factories and the stuff that are in them. That's how stuff is made. Ergo, means of production. Who owns those things? It's usually an owner, right? And so the idea to remove wealth inequality and who gets to call the shots, you implement democracy into a business, meaning the workers own the factory and all the stuff that's in it. They call the shots together. That's socialism. In the U.S., somehow socialism has become something else. It's whatever the government does, or if the taxes are socialism, or Obama phones are socialism, and a welfare state is socialism. It's become kind of messed up as a definition in the first place. But even even based on the definition of socialism that they apply to Bernie Sanders, they don't meet it. Tucker Carlson, first of all, is super rich. He's a millionaire who defends billionaires. But if you watch that Tucker Carlson clip where I forget if it was him criticizing Amazon or whatever, he goes on in the second half of that video that some people didn't play. He explains that the answer to low wages is not more regulation but less regulation. This is a guy who does not believe in higher wages. He doesn't believe in regulating corporations and that kind of stuff. What he does believe in essentially is he obviously has a feeling of white supremacy, pretty clearly white nationalism, but he seems to just be co-opting the sort of populist movement in order to fuel and support corporate tax cuts and deregulation and things of that nature. Also, he shits on socialists verbatim all the time, by the way. He hates socialism. He says it himself. Tucker Carlson is not a socialist in any way, shape, or form. Sorry. And just because you're a quote-unquote populist, which right-wing populism is fake populism, but even if you're a right-wing populist, like you want jobs to come back, that doesn't make you a socialist. So the 2016 candidate Trump, the only reason to ever really even bring up or analyze 2016 candidate Trump is really to analyze how he won or know what he said and things of that nature, what's popular because he won. But even that stuff doesn't make him a socialist. He wasn't somebody who, really was, he did purport to some things on the campaign trail, but it was a total fake. It was a facade. It was a lie. And so when he came into office, he tried repealing Obamacare. He did indeed do massive corporate tax cuts. Jobs were getting offshored in massive amounts. And so the analysis you should be having is not saying, oh, well, the candidate Trump was socialist. No, that's not even true, first of all. But second of all, if you were to say he was more populist, held some, ostensibly left-wing positions, it's to say that, oh, it was a right-winger who co-opted populism in order to basically push fascism through via the cloak of populism, right? And so that's a really important thing to understand, and that's a really important thing to point out, actually, because in history we see all over the world, especially we saw in obviously Germany, what Hitler had done in Germany was essentially, it was a National Socialist, right? The idea was basically to have this populist movement among Germans, Aryans, and they demonized the groups that they demonized, and but it was supposed to be populism for the Aryans, but it didn't even end up being that. Actually, what ended up happening was they basically gave corporations. They chose the corporations that they want to give all the power, but they gave the corporations they wanted all the power. Unionization was completely destroyed. Private profits went through the roof. There was nothing about Nazi Germany that was socialist, and Hitler had actually exiled a bunch of people who were the socialist wing of the Nazi Party. He had them killed on Night of Long Knives, so he was not a socialist. So what he did was he faked that. He used that as a cloak to basically use as a vehicle for his nationalism and his racism. And so that's an important thing to take away. Understand the right wing, figures are going to co-opt those and go through that, go through that sort of, vehicle or platform or whatever. I mean, if you wanted to say that there are sort of right-wing populists who are people who, which is kind of what he's trying to say is, right? He's trying to say that there are right-wingers who want closed borders but want a heavy welfare state. That's still social democracy, by the way. It's not socialism. But in the U.S. definition of socialism, I guess that's what would be considered. There are some people who are like that. It's few and far between, for sure. But the people that he listed are not. Now, Steve Bannon might actually be the one exception to that. He might actually be a quote-unquote socialist under the American definition. I remember him saying he wanted the marginal tax rate to be like 45% or something like that, top marginal rate. And he was exiled from the administration, if you recall, in those early days because Jared Kushner wanted to do more imperialism and stuff like that, and I guess Bannon was fighting against a lot of stuff or whatever. So Bannon might be the one exception, but Tucker Carlson absolutely is not, aligned with AOC. He hates everything about AOC ideologically. He hates everything, so quote unquote socialist, minimum wage increases, government regulation of businesses. His answer to minimum wage problems was less regulation, not more regulation. And he's insanely wealthy. He's lying out of his ass. Okay, Tucker Carlson is not. I mean, he says it quite clearly how he's not a socialist. Pretty obvious. You had to be a pretty massive dumbass to think that Tucker Carlson is a socialist. But I think the cloak of Glenn Greenwald is starting to come off because I think what he's just doing here is probably I think he's likely sort of projecting his own beliefs onto them. But I don't think Glenn Greenwald is really a lefty, really at all, to be honest with you. I think he's a secret right-winger. Again, the Citizens United thing is a big issue, and I think an indication of what he is. He's more on foreign policy issues and just doesn't seem to have much of a thought or belief system when it comes to economic issues and things of that nature. But, it's important to note that right-wing populism, politics-wise, is pretty much fake. And right-wing populism, if you look at it throughout history, has pretty much always been used as a sort of mechanism for racist, white supremacists, whatever race supremacists who don't actually care even about populism for their own peoples. They just use it as an excuse pretty much to, take power. Not an excuse, but a mechanism to gain support and then implement their nationalist policies without any of even the populism for their own group. So, that's a historical trend that we need to be aware of, and it can get kind of scary and dangerous. And that's one of the things that he seemed to kind of be enabling here.